Think about the last time you binged a television series. The most electric moments weren't when mysteries got solved. They were when new questions emerged. When you finally learned who the killer was or how the heist would unfold, you might have felt a brief satisfaction. But then what? Often, a subtle deflation. The show that gripped you for hours suddenly felt less magnetic. This isn't a flaw in the storytelling or in you. It's revealing something essential about consciousness itself. Your brain runs on prediction. Neuroscientists have discovered that much of what we experience as thinking is actually your mind constantly generating guesses about what comes next, then checking those guesses against reality. When you encounter a question, your neural networks light up with possibilities. Your brain starts running simulations, testing scenarios, building competing models of what might be true. This state of active exploration floods your system with dopamine, not because you found an answer, but because you're in the hunt. Here's what makes this fascinating. Dopamine isn't actually a pleasure chemical the way we often think. It's more like an interest chemical, an anticipation chemical. It spikes highest not when you achieve a goal, but when you're pursuing it and the outcome still feels uncertain but possible. The question mark itself is what your brain finds rewarding. When the answer arrives, the dopamine drops. The pursuit is over. Your prediction engine can relax. And relaxation, paradoxically, often feels less alive than the chase. But there's something deeper happening beyond just brain chemistry. Questions keep your mind in a state of openness. When you're holding a genuine question, you're acknowledging that reality is larger than your current understanding. You're making room for surprise, for perspectives you haven't considered, for connections you haven't yet drawn. This state of not knowing creates a kind of mental flexibility. Your thoughts remain fluid, responsive, capable of reorganizing themselves. Answers, by contrast, tend to crystallize. They create closure, which is sometimes exactly what we need, but closure also means boundaries. Once you know something, your mind often stops exploring that territory. The question stops generating new thoughts. The mystery that once pulled you forward now sits static, filed away. This is why students often become less curious about a subject after they've learned it. The answer replaced the question, and with it went the aliveness. Consider how differently your mind feels when someone says, "What if consciousness isn't produced by the brain but somehow filtered through it," versus "Consciousness is produced by neural activity in the prefrontal cortex." The first statement opens doors in your imagination. You might find yourself suddenly thinking about radios and receivers, about how a prism doesn't create light but reveals its spectrum, about what it would mean for reality if this were true. The second statement, even if correct, tends to close those doors. Your mind hears it and thinks, "Okay, got it," and moves on. This is why wisdom traditions across cultures have often taught through questions rather than answers. The Socratic method, Zen koans, the parables that end without moral summaries. These approaches understood something about how transformation actually happens in consciousness. When you're given an answer, you can accept or reject it, but either way, it remains somewhat external to you. When you're given a question that truly activates your curiosity, you can't help but think alongside it. The question becomes part of your internal landscape. It works on you while you work on it. There's also something here about control and the illusion of mastery. Answers promise us that we've captured something, pinned it down, understood it completely. But reality is wilder and more complex than any answer can fully contain. When we cling too tightly to our answers, we're often defending against the unsettling recognition that the world keeps exceeding our comprehension. Questions, by their nature, acknowledge this. They're humble. They admit what we don't know while simultaneously expressing our desire to understand. This honesty can feel more satisfying than the false confidence of premature certainty. You've probably noticed that the best conversations aren't where people exchange information efficiently and then end. The best conversations are where a question emerges that neither person had fully articulated before, and then you both spiral around it together, each comment revealing new angles, neither of you rushing toward a conclusion. The energy in those moments comes from the collaborative exploration itself. The question creates a shared space of wondering. What's sad is how much our educational systems and professional cultures optimize for answers rather than questions. We test students on what they know, not on the quality of their curiosity. We reward employees who solve problems, not necessarily those who find better problems to solve. We measure expertise by how many answers someone has accumulated. But the minds that truly change fields, the artists, scientists, and thinkers who open new territories, are almost always the ones who learn to live inside questions longer than others could tolerate. They developed a kind of comfort with not knowing that let them see what others, rushing toward answers, missed entirely. This doesn't mean answers have no value. Sometimes we desperately need them. When you're lost, you want directions, not a philosophical musing on the nature of wayfinding. When you're in pain, you want diagnosis and treatment, not mystery. Answers allow us to act, to build, to move forward practically. The issue is when we treat answers as the goal rather than as waypoints in an ongoing exploration. Perhaps what we're really drawn to isn't questions versus answers, but aliveness itself. And questions, by keeping us uncertain and searching, keep us more fully present. They prevent us from going on autopilot. They demand our attention in a way that settled knowledge doesn't. Every genuine question is an invitation to wake up, to notice what we'd overlooked, to discover that the world is still strange and surprising, despite all our accumulated understanding. So when you feel that quickening in your chest when encountering a beautiful question, when you feel more energized by why than by because, you're not being contrarian or difficult. You're responding to what consciousness actually loves, the lived experience of discovering, the feeling of your mind stretching towards something just beyond its current reach, the aliveness that comes from admitting you don't know while simultaneously caring deeply about finding out. If you think in questions more than answers, you're one of us. Subscribe, wonder, let's stay in the wondering together.